Mayor, Commissioners, thank you. It's a very interesting time to be having this discussion about historic Tinkerfield after the weekend full of significance, both locally and nationally, that we all just experienced. Many have touched on here. Obviously, here in town, Commissioner Sheehan and I would agree. It was great to see the Citrus Bowl full. I think maybe it's even more proof we should have looked a little further into having the soccer team play at the Citrus Bowl full time. And also nationwide, we had memorials of Selma and the Civil Rights Movement, which also touches here at home with Martin Luther King's visit to Tinker Field. And Commissioner Ings, your statement in the Orlando Sentinel was right on spot in a sad way. Demolishing this historic site and clearing this field with grass will lead to nothing more than a graveyard, as Commissioner Ings said. And as we've heard from many here in the public, adding a historical marker is nothing more than a tombstone to complete this graveyard that we're creating. And sadly, this weekend showed once again that the plan is to use Tinker Field as a parking lot. Having a nice, level, clear grass field is a lot easier to park cars on than a historic structure. But I'm worried, as many in our community are, that this parking lot will be the first and primary use moving forward until history completely fades from this site. When you look at a historic landmark, you have to see it to remember all the history that took place there. And Tinker Field, if this ordinance passes as written, and this site is demolished without a written, clear plan for renovation and rebuilding, will resemble nothing like the historic Tinker Field we remember and that history remembers. I believe another key problem with this process has been the way it has unfolded over the past year. You clearly hear still to this day many in our community, many more that couldn't make it here to City Hall today, who are very concerned about the appearance of a non-transparent process and also a closed process for this past year. In fact, if you look at this ordinance as written, Mayor Dyer and the council, it's very similar to the same ordinance that you all deferred just months ago. In fact, now we're just going to go ahead and clear this entire site as grass as the only difference, and we don't even have a memorial specified as you proposed the first time. I think it also sets a very dangerous precedent in terms of the Historic Preservation Board and recommendations made about the history of our community. We are now seeing a precedent set in part that will further delegitimize city boards, including the very important Historic Preservation Board. That these tasked and appointed on this board as experts in their field will not be relied upon for their recommendations. And I think that's a very fine line to walk, especially considering the lack of history still remaining throughout Orlando. I also like to point out, it was interesting to see the slide here, considering I was in contact with the clerk's office this week trying to find financial numbers about revenue brought in by Tinker Field, and I was told there were no figures that specified revenue by site. But I would like to point out, Tinker Field has been profitable with the historic structures on site, not without them. We did not have to demolish the historic grandstands, level the entire field in order to make a profit on concerts, festivals, and parking. And I don't think we need to rush into a decision to make that action now without a written plan. I think this community deserves nothing more than a very open and transparent process. The history is real. It touches every community, white, black, native, or people who have relocated here like myself. The history of Martin Luther King speaks to our souls. The history of baseball connects to all of our families. It's time to take a step back, to remember to do this process right. Designating the historic landmark is definitely a positive step. However, we must take this as an entire package. We have to have a written plan, a written proposal of what we will do with this site, and have it publicly vetted by members of this community as well as this board, with more time than simply having an ever-changing document here being worked by the council today. I think it would be the right decision to defer. We have deferred before on this very motion. We can take a little more time to make sure we get this right as a community. Commissioner Ortiz, I remember just a few years ago, you and I was calling balls and strikes over in your district. I know the love of baseball goes far on this entire council, but the love to do the process right for our community, to make sure our residents and our voters know that this was done in their best interest, I think that we all can agree must be put at the top priority of this entire process. We can take a few more months, we can take a few more weeks, whatever it will take, and we can open the process, open the doors, and have some real conversations with our community before we make any decision to demolish and destroy this historic site. And I urge you all to either vote to defer or vote against this ordinance as currently written. Thank you.
Nancy Jacobson, and then Clinton Salter.